find chapters like this rather funny because you can read it in like 20 seconds. There's really no dialogue, just a bunch of beautiful action between Yoru and Pochita, and then you're done. You go about your day. And sometimes you even forget that you even read the chapter. There's really not all too much to talk about, but I do have some interesting conversations, hopefully. The first one being, what happened to Michigan? This was like the big moment, turning Michigan into a sword, seeing the whole entire state get transformed into a physical thing, which is cool. It's a really interesting concept, and I was excited to see how Fujimoto would play into that visually. But then we got Oregon, which very far away from each other, and it makes me wonder, why even play into Michigan? Was it a mistranslation? Did they do something wrong? Did Fujimoto change his mind? What happened? From my understanding, it wasn't a mistranslation. It was originally Michigan, and now we got Oregon. The context of it is still identical, like you're still getting you would have expected with the Michigan sword, just with a different state. So it makes me think that perhaps Fujimoto didn't plan around the visualization of what a Michigan sword would be, because when you see Oregon, it makes sense. Like, it's just the word Oregon as the blade and USA as the hilt. And I think that's really cool. On one half, it's creative because you're just literally taking the word and transforming it into a sword. On the other half, it's not that creative because you could think of something else, maybe the shape of the state or something that represents the state itself instead of just the literal word. Obviously, it's up to you on how you feel about it, but I think it's funny. It's a bit whimsical. If you were to put Michigan into a sword form, can kind of work, but there's like the flow of it doesn't really add up. Does that make sense? It's almost like he didn't really try or want to do the word Michigan, maybe because it was too long or it looked kind of silly. And Oregon is shorter and more compact and lines pretty much perfectly, so it might have been easier to draw or less time consuming or whatever. That is probably the only reasoning I can give on the change from Michigan to Oregon. So all of the conversation we had about Michigan and its importance with the war and blah blah blah, kind of just thrown out the window, which I think that was kind of a far reach anyway, but it was a good conversation to have about Michigan and potentially its importance. But now with Oregon, I do like how it transforms the state and not the people. Almost like the state becomes the weapon and then the fuel or the power behind it is the people. So you get this cool kind of visual representation in the chapter. Everyone falls out of the state that's being transformed and into the water below. And one of them is Fumiko. Poor girl has had it rough. Yoru uses the people of Oregon as fuel, so they get turned or absorbed into her weapon instantly, and their body evaporates or gets turned into what is assumedly water. Originally I thought it might have been blood, but water makes a little bit more sense. I've seen a couple of people talking about this, what could it mean, etc. A lot of people thought it was just people falling into the water or drowning and that's a splash, but the next panel of people that you see her absorb are not in the water. They're from Virginia and they're watching the event happen and they get transformed and you get like a little splash title card. So these people are quite literally being turned into fuel and their bodies turned into water. It brings up a question. Are they dead? Because death has been erased. You see Yoru in this chapter try to figure out why their fight is continuing and why Pochita is able to heal pretty much instantaneously without devouring devil blood or anything. And it's because the concept of death has vanished. I need to reiterate, hopefully so it's a bit more understandable, that death itself isn't gone. The concept of death that we originally knew has gone, but a new version of it will take its place. Firstly, Pochita has not erased every example or understanding of death and afterlife. We know that there's multiple variations, and we know that Pochita has erased multiple variations. This death that we know is the most recent one, but we also know that Pochita is not strict or linear. His power works in very mysterious ways, and it does not reshape or recontort life instantly. A recent example that I think Fujimoto gave to us was when he erased ears, but there was still stuff related to ears being sold in shops, etc., etc. So humans found a way instantly to navigate the concept of ears and why they would still need that stuff. Does that make sense? I guess the simplest explanation is that even if something gets hard erased, you would think that all the things connected to that would also disappear, because why would you need earrings if you have no ears? But Pochita does not work that way. If you apply that same understanding to death, that means death itself will disappear, but something else equivalent will take its place. So perhaps what we're seeing is humans kind of reverting back to a bit of a fundamental state, and that is in regards of water. I'm about to get very exaggerated, a little bit over the top. You don't have to take it too seriously. It's just a fun thing to talk about. I don't think Fujimoto is going for this, but water is incredibly symbolic. There is so many things that you can do with water. There's so many symbolisms and metaphors and thematic presence that you can give in every single direction to make things connect. Here is a couple that is simplified, but I think applies itself to the situation kind of nicely. It gives you context, but doesn't change anything entirely. Maybe just something Fujimoto thought about in terms of death, water, rebirth, etc., or something that I'm just overthinking because it's fun to do. In one way, water symbolizes a transition from one state to another, often implying a return to a fundamental state or, quote unquote, a metamorphosis. This is exactly what happened. Another one is purification and cleansing, water's ability to wash away impurities, which can be physical, emotional, and spiritual. Perhaps you could apply that as well. The last one is a little bit more interesting, and that is life and femininity. So you see, water can be viewed as a universal symbol for life and fertility, quite literally the origin of all things, because perhaps you can link it to the many different concepts surrounding wombs and birth, life and death. These are open to interpretation, so you can add a lot of things to it, but if you apply some of this to death not being represented in the story currently and what would happen to a human if they die, perhaps they're going back into this cycle of metamorphosis, turning into water, going back to the legitimate origin of all things, or in a more war sense, washing away their impurities to become something greater. There's a bigger conversation in regards to spirituality and religion, which I don't really want to go down, but obviously Christianity, you can baptize people, being born again, turning water into wine, a divine act. So what does this really add or even mean to humans being turned to water? Honestly, nothing. I don't think Fujimoto will play down this path at all, but if he wanted to, I think it would be an interesting thing to play upon on what happens to humans when they die now. Do they just evaporate into water? Go back to the origin of all things? Play into these different thematic motifs? Or is there another version of it? Now, the fight between Yoru and Pochita is a funny one because it's escalating higher and higher, but they're really just throwing back and forth. Pochita is playing an interesting game because you watch him fight and you know that he's not going 100% out. He's not fully committing to this fight, yet in other panels it seems like he is. It's a hard thing to balance, right? Do you think Pochita's actually trying to kill and erase Yoru right now, which I don't think is a thing. We've seen him actually try and actually be serious, and it's ridiculous what he is capable of and what he's able to pull off. He has done some of those ridiculous things in these past handful of chapters. Obviously him coming back, healing constantly. It's a funny thing to witness because Yoru doesn't really know how to handle it. She's kind of just rattling through her arsenal of all the things that she thinks should actually kill Pochita. But if the reason that this fight is continuing because none of them can die, where does that really put the fight itself? A continuous, never-ending war between them? Or does Pochita actually have to erase her? So if Pochita doesn't throw up death, or a version of death is not reborn into the world, or a new idea of death that humans and devils are now occupying, Pochita theoretically has to erase Yoru. I guess there is the alternative of making her use all of her weaponry and run her dry so then you can do something. Maybe he just continues to erase the weapon, which could also be a thing, but then you start erasing parts of the United States, which, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Fujimoto to do. As scary as Yoru can be, it's funny to see her inability to act cautiously. There's no real thought or plan. She's just rattling off through the most powerful things that she has, which I guess is a fine plan, but none of it is working against Pochita, so you think that she would pivot. That would be the smarter play for her to make. But she's always surprised when something doesn't work. She thinks she won and then realizes she hasn't. I like how that's presented because it feels natural to her character that she wouldn't plan anything or that she doesn't think about things 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. Instead, she kind of just goes down the list of what can happen next and just continues to do those things to a T without really changing anything, trying to get more powerful and do more damage and hope that something will actually kill him. It shows the inability to change, the inability to evolve. And I think that plays into her narcissistic side rather well. That in her view, she feels like she can win easily without trying to do anything tricky or situational. I guess the question I have now is, where do we go? How long do we continue to go down this list? Because she pulled out Nuclear Punch, which seems pretty early. We're going into nukes and bomb territory. Hooray! These are big attacks coming out. Huge states, a lot of people, nuclear warfare. Hell has seemingly been blown up. All the doors get scattered towards the end. So maybe something changes here. Maybe hell is open, which would be crazy if we go down that route, where hell and earth are now kind of open to each other and devils and humans can like freely pass, which goes into a much bigger conversation of like merging the worlds together and trying to create a homogenous thing, which would only happen if Potita erases certain aspects of devils and humans to align them more equally. I don't really know where Fujimoto wants to take this, but I'm always excited, I'm always interested, and I'm always curious to hear all of your thoughts. So if you have any, please do share them. I'd love to read them. Thank you.